Thank you all for coming. This is a topic, if you're a futurist, if you like to think about technology and its impact on dentistry, you are in the right place. And I'm here with Dr. Kyle Stanley, the co-founder of Pearl. And just to give you a little bit of a bio on him, he was named as the next generation of cosmetic dentistry by the American Academy of Cosmetic Dentistry, the top 10 young educators in dentistry by the Seattle Study Club, and the world's top 100 doctors in dentistry, graduated from USC, and then went on to complete a dental implant residency and dental implant specialty in Brazil. That's a great place to go. He's a researcher who's published in some of the top dental journals about topics relating to aesthetics, implants, and plastic surgery. And with his company, Pearl, he's changing the way patients are treated through artificial intelligence. This is what I'm so excited about. And he's going to talk about artificial intelligence broadly as he's in this field and one of the leaders in this field. So Dr. Stanley is also a prominent advocate of mental health. Very cool. Within dentistry and through his light side community has helped countless dentists reduce stress and anxiety. He maintains a private practice in the lowly town of Beverly Hills, where he focuses on implant surgery and prosthetics. So Dr. Stanley, thank you so much. Really excited about talking about artificial intelligence. And I think you have a presentation. We're going to start with that. And then as questions come in, and then we'll have some time for Q&A as well.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks so much for the kind introduction. I'm looking forward to answering some questions after I get done with this. Let me just make sure. Can you guys see my screen here?
See your screen, and now you're in presentation mode. Perfect.
Great. Okay, so like Emmet said, we're going to be talking about AI in dentistry. I think there's a lot of misconceptions on AI in general, but especially in dentistry. So hopefully I can answer some of those questions. Again, my name is Dr. Kyle Stanley, and I am one of the co-founders of Pearl. The overview today, we're going to talk about an intro into AI, some of its history. We'll go into how AI is into medicine, and then specifically into dentistry. We're going to say why AI. Do we even need this technology? Is this something we need? We've been doing dentistry for so long. Do we even need this? And then we'll go into putting AI to work in our practices, and we'll go specifically into how AI functions for a DSO, for a group practice, which is why we're all here today. So what is this revolutionary technology that everybody's really talking about right now? Well, I love this quote from Asimov because it brings about this idea of how AI is seen in the general public. I think AI is seen as, the robot coming from the future to kill us, the AI that won't open the pod bay doors. That sci-fi AI, that's called artificial general intelligence. And that's computer intelligence that is more or less indistinguishable from human intelligence. That AI does not and may never exist. And it's not what we're going to be talking about today. The AI that you hear about today is not at all human-like. The AI that you hear about today is something called narrow AI. It's very narrowly focused, and it's very narrowly intelligent. It's really, really good at doing just one subject. So for example, I love Porsches. An AI could look at the taillight of any Porsche and identify the model year. But, I can do that. And I can fry an egg, and I can play tic-tac-toe, and I can dance with my son. That takes general intelligence. So the AI that could identify those Porsches, but that's it. But it's really, really good at doing that. And not only that, it's much faster at doing that than I could. And that becomes very important when you're talking about scale, especially when you're talking about, group practices. If we're not only looking at, a few radiographs, but we're looking at hundreds of thousands of radiographs, that is where you need these narrow AI machines. So I hope you can see a little bit of the difference there between, I think, what sci-fi thinks of as AI and what's really happening with AI today. And an example of that is you may train AI to specifically look for caries. That's all it can do, look for caries. That is a narrow AI. And when I first got into AI, I was really kind of surprised on how long it's been around. You know, AI started being developed in the 1950s, and there were a lot of different strategies. The most promising one was machine learning, but this was halted by processing power and data. So it didn't really come into fruition until in the 1980s, 1990s, when the internet boom happened. And that's when you finally had all of the components that you could bring together so that you can make AI function like the human brain. And that's really what we're trying to do with these neural networks. You may have heard of this. So you need these three things. You need data-driven algorithms. But even if you have those, you need processing power. And that's why AI has progressed so quickly in the last 10 or 20 years, is the fact of Moore's law. You probably have heard of Moore's law, where processing power is doubling every 18 months. And now with big data, everything has been digitized now, and especially in dentistry as well. If you tried to do AI in the 90s, not very many people even had digital radiographs or digital charting. But now, not only do we have digital charting, digital radiograph, but we have intraoral scans, we have face scans, CT, everything has been digitized. So it makes it so that dentistry is really ripe for AI to come in. And AI is really all around us. Most of us interact with deep learning, machine learning systems every day of our lives. So you look at some of these photos and you look at predictive analytics. I use this every day that I'm driving. I put it into my Waze, I put my address in and say, this is where I want to go. Tell me where the cops are, tell me where the traffic is, tell me where I should avoid. This is using big data and predictive analytics, predicting where the best place to go is. And similar to when you get these security alerts on your bank account, it's predicting what your spending will be like. So if something happens that's out of the ordinary, you're going to get an email, you're going to get a text saying, hey, is this really you? Also, you have natural language processing. You guys use this probably every day too. If you have Siri or Alexa or Google Home, and you're saying, hey, Alexa, lock the front door, or turn on the lights in the living room. I love this kind of home automation stuff. So I like using this. Now, my favorite is computer vision. And that's a lot of what we do at Pearl. What you see, the rainbow coming out of the girl's mouth and her eyes getting really big, these filters that we see on our apps. But not only is it being used, for fun, it's also being used for surveillance and for, intelligent, I wouldn't say self-driving, but I would say assisted driving. And that's oftentimes where we're using it because it's so powerful. I think computer vision is really so interesting. Natural language processing, you can think of as allowing the computer to listen and understand. Computer vision is allowing the computer to understand imagery and understand what's happening within that imagery, analyzing that imagery, just how we would with our human brain. And so it's no wonder why medicine really started developing AI early on. And when you look at some of these numbers here, in breast cancer screenings, 5% more true positive diagnoses, 11% fewer false positives. That is really powerful. Imagine if you are a woman that is told you have breast cancer, you get, mastectomy, and you realize that it was a false positive. Also, 32 times faster treatment, 96% diagnostic accuracy. Medicine is really leaning forward into AI. But when we think about medicine, we have to think that oftentimes it's higher stakes. And that's what makes dentistry so ripe to bear fruit from AI. We have relatively lower stakes, right? We're not finding cancer. You know, I've seen cancer in one of my patients in 11 years of practicing. We're not usually looking for fractures unless you're doing oral surgery. Also, there's less politics, right? There's no hospitals to deal with. We're oftentimes not dealing with government programs. So going in and getting a new technology into a new practice, just talking to the practice owner or the office manager or maybe the, you know, executive of a DSO. We're also dealing with single biological region. You know, we're not dealing with the breasts and the lungs and wrist fractures and shoulder fractures and brain tumors. And no, we're dealing with one area. So that really makes dentistry a more fertile ground for this AI. And that's why we've seen such a boom in the uptick of technology in dentistry that in regards to AI. So diagnostics, when everyone thinks about AI in medicine, they think about diagnostics. And, you know, me as a practicing clinician, that's of course where I think too. When you look at this image, you can see that the AI is diagnosing caries, open margins, existing restorations, bone loss, calculus. You know, it's not saying periapical radiolucencies on here because it's not a PA, but so many of the pathologies that we see on a daily practice can be seen and can be identified with AI that's trained on really good data. And it can be used as an assistive tool. You know, I have a busy practice and I am not always the same every day. And we're going to get into one of the problems with dentistry and one of the problems with humans. AI is being used for the restoration process as well. So from the scan quality score, a lot of us are using intraoral scanners now. And you may have seen that a lot of the intraoral scanners are using AI to remove the finger that's there to retract the tongue or the cheek. Just automatically, it's removing these and making our quality better. It can also do things like margin marking. You know, there's big labs that have an army of human margin markers, and all they do every day is sit around, you know, clicking, click, 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 making circles around margin marking. And AI can do that faster and just as good as a human. So what you can do is you can take those humans off of that and put them on something that really needs, you know, human tasks like staining, glazing, and all the little artistic aspects of dentistry that, you know, a machine isn't necessarily as good at. It is being used already in CAD design. So you may have seen this with things like CEREC, where you place the prep into the occlusion and it automatically gives you the CAD design. That is the form of AI. So it's limiting chair time. It's helping with remakes, reducing remakes, better communication with our laboratory team, and making things more consistent. And this ultimately makes dentistry better for our patients, better for consumers, which makes them want to come into our practice more. It's always difficult when you have a case that you take an impression, you send it to the lab, something's wrong, they send it back. Having AI overlook every step of this makes this more consistent and then a better experience for our patients. You may have seen robotics being introduced, and a lot of how robotics works on the back end is an AI platform. And I love implant dentistry. You know, you probably heard in my bio that I kind of specialize in implants and implant restorations. This makes things more precise, more consistent. It doesn't allow you to drill too deep. You know, a lot of my students that I teach, they worry about going too deep or too shallow or the wrong angle. And this really verifies that and gives it a higher quality of care for your patients. And I really think that this is the future. You know, robotic dentistry may not be fully here yet, like the one on the right that was done in Asia. You know, they say, oh, there was no doctor there. Yeah, but there were 20 doctors standing around watching. I thought it was kind of a funny video. But why AI? I mean, it's this flashy, cool, sounds really cool, but do we really need this? You know, my dad practiced dentistry for 44 years. Did he need AI? I mean, every dentist thinks they're pretty good. If you ask me, I'd say, yeah, I'm a pretty good dentist. You ask my brother, he'd say, yeah, I'm a pretty good dentist. My dad, yeah, I'm a pretty good dentist. Not very many dentists think that they're not good dentists. But it turns out that it's not entirely true that we don't need this. You may be familiar with the Reader's Digest study that was done a few decades ago, where an investigative journalist went to 50 different offices and got 50 different diagnoses and treatment plans. That doesn't look good, and that's difficult being a patient, because what is the truth there? Who's right? If you ask all the dentists, they would all say, oh yeah, what I said is right. When we come out of dental school, and I taught at a dental school for 9 years, you know, our students feel like they're trained. But as good as we think we are, we have an inconsistency problem in dentistry. And there's studies that we've done and other people have done to back this up. So one example on the right here, we looked at about 9,000 images and asked 3 different doctors to identify caries in the image. And what we find is that it's all over the place. You have doctors that see caries everywhere. You have doctors that see caries nowhere. You have doctors that kind of are in the middle. And when you take all 3 of them together, unanimously, you only get a 4.3% caries positive union. And that's relatively low. When you look at this left study that the Dental AI Council did, and this is a nonprofit organization that we helped to found, we looked at one FMX that went to 136 doctors, and we asked them to diagnose and treatment plan this patient. And we got treatment plans from $300 to $36,000. Now imagine being the patient. Imagine going to one doctor, they say it's $36,000. Go to another doctor, they say it's $300. But not only that, we looked at, you know, this is just a specific tooth here. On this tooth number 3 from this FMX, we had 51% of the doctors that said there was no caries, and we had 49% that says there is caries. I mean, that is difficult for the patient. What do we do with that? And if you are a DSO manager that's managing, you know, 10, 50, 100, 500 doctors, how do you keep your standard of care when there's so much inconsistency in dentistry? So inconsistency is one of the main reasons that I think we need AI in dentistry. And insurance carriers were one of the early adopters into AI into their business. And they're using it in 2 different ways. Number one, they're using it for utilization management, which basically means they're using it to approve cases. So if a case comes in, they'll analyze the radiograph with AI technology, and then they'll cross-reference that to see what's happening in the claim, right? So, you know, let's say the claim is for scaling and root planning, they'll say, okay, do we see calculus and bone loss, for example? If they do, and if there's enough, then boom, it goes automatically to be approved. It doesn't need to be approved by a human, which saves them, of course, time and money, and it makes us dentists happy because we get our claim approved faster. We can do our treatment faster or better, you know, make more money. It's also being used in fraud, waste, and abuse detection, which I think is really interesting. You know, coming from a family of dentists, I don't like the very small amount of dentists that give us a bad name. You know, most of us are hardworking men and women trying to make a living, trying to help our patients. But then you do have those fraudsters that are giving us a bad name. And you look at this image, and this image actually was sent to an insurance carrier to be approved for a root canal. And when you look at the before and after, you say, okay, I see some caries. There's like a big restoration. I could see why they did a root canal. You look at the root canal, pretty good fill. I mean, very nice fill. It goes all the way to the tip of the root. If I was a reviewer for this insurance company, I would say, yeah, we should approve this. However, when you use AI and you look at a pixel level, you can see that this is actually photoshopped. So this root canal was not done. This is the same image, just with a Photoshop on top of it, a Photoshopped root canal that was actually approved. So, this is not only saving insurance companies money, but also saving consumers money, because many of these insurance companies are government focused. So yeah, insurance companies were one of the early adopters to AI. And this distrust with our patients is really bad for our business. When you look at the lack of trust with dentists, they trust us less than they trust medical doctors, and this has been studied, or airline pilots. And it's not like they're reading these studies on inconsistency. No, they see it firsthand. They go to me and I say they have three cavities. They go to my dad says they have 4 cavities. They go to my brother, he says they have no cavities. Who's really right? And what does the patient have to say about that? And you can see in this study that 82% of patients said that they would prefer that their dentist use the most advanced AI diagnostic technology available. So the way I see AI and our models at Pearl is that they're trained to address the consistency issue that we have in dentistry. If an AI gets something right, it's not going to get that same thing wrong the next day. But a human, we can, right? So, you have your coffee, you may get it right. You don't have your coffee, you may get it wrong. We just are inherently inconsistent. So when you are inconsistent, that reduces the trust with your patients. And oftentimes those patients then have poor oral health care because they don't have the trust with their doctor. So when you take into account everything that we've talked about, you have to remember too that we're not only dealing with clinical care, right? There's really positive implications for practice management. So you take these clinical topics and you transfer them to a business setting. We're really in the business of delivering care. And AI's impact on the clinical side and the management side, this allows you to bring in new patients. This allows you to keep the existing patients that you have. I can give the best care possible, but if I'm not getting new patients and if I'm not keeping my existing patients and I'm not understanding the limits of my own abilities, I can do the best care possible, but I'm not going to have a business. So the clinical benefits deliver tremendous benefits to the business managers or the owners with less remakes, higher standard of care, risk reduction. We don't like to admit that we make mistakes as humans because it's shameful. And from a business side, it's really costly. You come in, you try the crown in, the crown doesn't fit, there's a margin open, the bite is off, you have to send it back. You just lost all that chair time. And the next time the patient comes in, you're losing money now on that crown, right? So by increasing your standard of care clinically, you can increase your financial benefits. So the way AI's impact on clinical care is affecting practice management can really be amplified when you're dealing with a group. If you have 6 practices or 60 practices, those problems will really be amplified. And we've seen that in our DSO clients at Pearl. So the 5 benefits that I see for DSOs, number 1 would be quality control. A lot of our chief clinical officers and DSOs are doing audits on their practitioners, a lot more than I thought they were actually. And when you use AI, you can boil the ocean to give you those specific little tidbits that you need in order to do those audits. You can find mistreatments, overtreatment, undertreatment. You can find claims that shouldn't have got approved or got approved, whatever it may be. So it allows you to have a more standard, which is very difficult when you're handling humans that are very inconsistent. Process automation. AI can analyze what's happening in radiographs and do things like auto charting, automatic claim submission. And what that does is reduces decision fatigue with your doctors and your team members and allows them to focus on other tasks. One of the big ones that we've seen is office administration. With AI, cross-referencing with your practice management system, you can look at things like treatment plan acceptance. Do we need to bring in an implant specialist, periodontist, oral surgeon, based on all of the patients that we have that have missing teeth or hopeless teeth? Do we need to bring in more hygienists because of all the patients that we have with calculus and bone loss that we've been doing prophies on? You can make staffing decisions and keep the chairs filled. I mean, one of the great things you can do is, let's say you're scheduling for a few weeks out, you're trying to get some chairs filled in your hygiene schedule, and you have 100 people that you could call. Who should you call first? AI can tell you that. It can tell you who has unscheduled treatment, but not only that, where in those radiographs is something that the doctor may have missed. Maybe we should bring that patient in first because that patient needs the most care, but also they're the most valuable patient to us as well. From a marketing standpoint, we don't like to talk too much about marketing because we're in the business of giving care, but we need to market to our existing patients and new patients. And with AI, you can go through all of your radiographs and then market to patients specifically based on what they have in their radiographs and what they need from a care standpoint. So you don't want to send an implant notification to all of your patients if they don't have any missing teeth or hopeless teeth, just in the same way you wouldn't send a denture promo to someone who has all their teeth and doesn't have any problems. AI allows you to do targeted recall, targeted marketing based on what's happening in your data. And then acquisition. Many DSOs, especially at the DEO, are buying new practices. And when I bought my practice, we went in there, we looked at a few preps, we looked through maybe 10 charts, and we said, oh yeah, okay, it looks pretty good, let's buy this practice. Now what you can do, it just makes what we did look really stupid. We can go in and say, was there any fraud? Did they just recently raise their fees? How many crowns have they done? How many crowns did they miss? How much dentistry is still in this practice? You guys have probably, if you've bought in a lot of practices, you've probably bought a practice and realized there's no dentistry left in this practice. And with AI, you're looking at data. You're not going in there really with rosy glasses on and thinking about your opinion. You're looking at data, and it's allowing you to make data-driven decisions before you buy a practice or a group of practices. And this is what we do at Pearl with Practice Intelligence. So what Practice Intelligence does is it takes all of the imagery, all of the radiographic imagery from your practice or your group of practices, cross-references that with what's happening in the practice management system. So if you have a patient that is getting a prophy done, but Practice Intelligence finds calculus and bone loss, and it cross-references that with the practice management system and says, this patient hasn't had scaling and root planing in the last 2 years, they may be a candidate for scaling and root planing, then we can float that up so that your office managers can see that, communicate that with your doctors, and maybe the doctor would like to change it. Maybe they just missed something, or they got overwhelmed and they didn't see it. Or maybe they look at it and say, you know what, no, I think Mrs. Jones is good. Let's keep her on a prophy. It's allowing the doctor to make that final decision, but it's like being a little parrot on his shoulder saying, hey, did you see the mesial of 19? There may be caries there. Do you want to check that one more time? So I encourage you guys to contact us and try a demo. All of our clients are profoundly surprised on the opportunity that they see the first day. Just to give you an idea, our clients see about $750,000 to $1 million in opportunity on the first day per practice. So if you have a 60 practice office, you will probably see $60 million of opportunity on the first day of Practice Intelligence. And there's really three things that Practice Intelligence can do well. It gives you better clinical care. So it allows that second opinion-like view on all of your radiographic images, and your team members can float through those and put that onto the practice management system so that your doctors can be more aware of what may be happening in the radiographs. And by having better clinical care, you get better financial outcomes. So your front office team can fill the chair with patients that are more valuable and need the care more than someone else. It's there to support your practitioners and their team. And like I said before, you get really an immediate return on investment. So if you guys have questions, you can contact us. It's just contact@hellopearl.com, or you can go to our website, hellopearl.com, and request a demo. But I'd be happy to answer any questions that anyone has.
Hey, thank you, Dr. Stanley. All right, so I have a few questions right out of the gate here. Number one, as a consumer and not a dentist, I've always been perplexed by how difficult it is for dentists to be able to get treatment coordination, because the x-ray is just so unfriendly, using layman terms, for the sales process, right? It's like, hey, here's this black, white, gray image. This is going to cost you $1,000. Well, what about that over there? Oh, that's Cheetos from this morning, right? And
right.
Again, as a layperson, you've just got very complex piece to look at. And from what I hear you saying too, and my own experiences, and for dentists, it's a long day. It's a lot for them to look at and to assess as well. So I'm curious, maybe first of all, where do you see this going as far as patient interaction and helping with treatment coordination long term? Do you see this helping a patient have more confidence? I saw your slide around, what was it, 82% or so forth, right? It's kind of the Amazon 5 stars. We trust that more. So yeah, love to hear your thoughts. And what are you seeing in practical outcomes in the practices Pearl's in?
Yeah, every dentist has had a patient that said, well, I'd like to get a second opinion, whether they tell you to your face or they tell your practice manager when, they walk out the door. This gives you that built-in second opinion. You can say, this is a third-party trained, AI system that's been trained by thousands of dentists from around the world. And not only do I think you have a cavity here, but the AI and these other doctors would agree. So it's built in. And I think not only that, what you were talking about with the team members, you can get more, non-dental team members involved in this as kind of a screening tool. So, they may see something when they're setting up the day for tomorrow, and then put something on the schedule and just say, hey, doc, I'm not a dentist, but the AI said that there's caries on that mesial 19. Can you just check that? I know she's coming in for number 12, but can you just check number 19 while she's in the chair? And, as a dentist, if my assistants or my hygienist or my front office tells me to check something, I'm never going to be like, how dare you? You're not the dentist. I'm like, thank God, I have so many things to think about. One of the things that we always say is dentists are part-time radiologists. And that's what's different with dentistry and medicine, right? In medicine, if you're the foot surgeon, someone else takes the radiograph, someone else reads the radiograph, and you just get the interpretation. And in dentistry, we're reading the radiograph, we're oftentimes paying payroll, we're managing, we're ordering, we're doing so many things that decreasing any decision fatigue that I may have during the day is something that I appreciate.
Yeah, I mean, as an entrepreneur, the more you can commoditize, the better you can have direct interaction on the customized piece and relationship piece.
That's right.
With the customer, which I think is critical. Okay, one of the questions that also came in, when we talk about standard of care, in a lot of ways, what's being built into this AI is a standard of care, or at least a diagnostic of care, right? I guess what's actually treated is still in the judgment of the dentist. So
that's right.
I could turn something into a wait and see, and you could say that, no, this needs to be treated today. So I probably want to clarify that. But even so, like what is going in to train this AI to see these things. I guess worst case scenario, I put a product like Pearl in my practice and it's identifying a bunch of crap that I don't, now you're actually creating more load, right? Of me having to filter through. So, what's the confidence level and how did you get there where you're like, no, this is worth looking at. And in fact, even if my assistants or team members said something, I actually think it has credibility.
Yeah, well, to go back to the first point you were making is, you're right. If we can just start with a standard of care for diagnosis, that helps with talking to our patients, because I think patients understand that humans are different, right? Okay, if I see caries and you see caries, but I want to wait and you want to treat, that's a little more understandable. It's like, well, we were trained in different areas. I may be more conservative, you may be more preventative or something like this. And I think that's easier to understand than, I don't see caries and you do see caries. That is like, what do you mean? Like, it's got to be black and white there. But on how it's trained, yeah, AI is dependent on the data that goes in. So if it's trained with poor data, then it comes poor. If it's trained well, then it performs really well. And we've done a lot of studies to show that it is performing just as good of a dentist, if not better sometimes. Yeah, but I think what you have to remember is that we're not saying dentist versus AI. If the AI tells you there's cavity here and you disagree, you're the doctor, right? It's your decision. This is an assistive tool for you. And I think that's where you see doctors being like, am I going to lose my job? Is the AI taking over? No, this is there to assist you. So I'm really big into cars. I like to think of this as the, intelligent cruise control that we see in cars, right? It's not taking over the car. It's there to tell you, hey, the person in front of you is stopping a little faster than, you're noticing. Maybe you should stop here, but it's not taking over. And in the same way, that's how AI is here to assist doctors. The doctor is always the first opinion. We have a product called Second Opinion that's launching in Europe. And that's why we call it Second Opinion, is that the doctor is the first opinion. Yeah, great question.
You talked a little bit about the integration with practice management software. And by the way, you're still sharing. I don't know if you want to pull that down or not.
Sure.
But everyone's thinking probably about their practice management software and imaging softwares and so forth. So where would they get a list, or is there a couple you could rattle off where they could say, okay, this would work with mine, or not yet, but it will in the future?
Yeah, we haven't found a system that we haven't been able to integrate with that may be out there. But as of yet, all of the major ones, when you're thinking of like Eaglesoft and Dexis and Dentrix and Dentrix Enterprise and Open Dental and all of the major ones. What we find with some DSOs is that they have difficulties because of the acquisition process. So they may have 20 offices and they have 20 different practice management systems, and some may take a little longer to integrate. But we haven't had one yet that we haven't been able to integrate. Some have taken longer, and we've had some hiccups. But yeah, I haven't had one that hasn't worked yet.
And with that integration capability, it's allowing me then to see within the Pearl software these recommendations, correct?
That's right. Yeah. So you're going to see things like different funnels that show you patients that are on prophies, but potentially could be scaling root planing patients based on what we see in the radiographs and also what we see in the practice management system. It's going to bring up our call sheets, which is an intelligent list of patients to call for recall. Not only just they're overdue, but they're overdue, plus they have some AI detections that someone may have missed.
Yeah.
So by cross-referencing that with the practice management system, you get a little more insight. You get a lot more insight. Really.
Yeah. One of the things that a lot of practice owners are concerned about is the rising cost of employees and team members. And, we see this happening, right? And I was talking to a practice owner who has multiple locations, a doc, and he said something really interesting to me. He said, Emmett, in business, you either have an expense problem or you have a revenue problem. And my
Mhm.
belief is dentistry has a revenue problem.
Yeah.
If McDonald's is going to have to pay bonuses, we're going to have to figure stuff out. But when you have 40% penetration rate, when you're not caring for, $1 million of practice opportunity and care in practices, then we've got to get our arms, we've got to be better at marketing, we've got to be better at treatment coordination, and we've got to have assistive tools to make this happen. So one of the questions that someone asked is, you talked about AI capabilities. What percentage of capabilities do you think are available today? And I guess maybe another way to ask that is, what currently exists for dentistry that could be solved? And then maybe what do you see in the future?
I mean, the future is there's a lot coming, but currently reading all type of radiographs, cross-referencing that with practice management systems and making treatment recommendations, allowing your office managers and front office team to assist in getting the right patients in the chair, allowing your practitioners to have that second opinion and have a better standard of care is currently here. All the major pathologies that me as a dentist would look at, right? So calculus, bone loss, caries, periapical radiolucency, wide and periodontal ligaments. I know I'm missing some. All of that is currently here today being used in offices around the world. When you think of the future, I mean, so many things will be automated. I love implant dentistry, and we'll get to a point with implant dentistry where you take an intraoral scan, you take a CT scan, and you put those two together. The AI will realize what type of bone is there, what style of implant, what brand of implant. It will design the surgical guide, put it into the robot, and the robot will place the implant, and they're collecting the money. Yeah, I think it'll just make dentistry so much more enjoyable, because us dentists, we love dentistry. I mean, you get two dentists together, we just like, hey, are you using Emacs, or have you seen that new thing that's coming out, this new material, this guided surgery? We love talking about dentistry, but dentistry is difficult. It's a difficult job. There's so many different aspects to it that if we can limit some of the things we do and allow us to focus on the clinical care, I think a lot of dentists would be happier and enjoy going to work more.
Well, and let's be honest, the patient doesn't appreciate that wonderful conversation those two dentists have, right?
That's right.
What they do appreciate is a dentist who isn't high on anxiety, who's relaxed, who clearly cares about them and feels confident about what they're treating. And I think assistive tools like this make a more confident, more relaxed dentist who has, frankly, more time for the patient and less trying to read all of this stuff. And listen, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. You can relate it to, again, bringing it back to implants is, I do every implant with guided surgery. Why do I do it with guided surgery? I could do it with my hands, right? But what I could do with guided surgery is have less treatment time, right? So I'm in with the patient less. So the patient's going to swell less. They're going to have a better experience. The implant is placed in the correct position. So I have less risk, right? From a marketing standpoint, it's better. Now, I could do it without it, right? But with it, I'm that much better. And that's how AI is too. Can you do dentistry without it? Of course. Can you do dentistry better, more efficient, faster, more consistent with AI? 100%.
Okay, this is a question that's a little above my head, so maybe you
Okay.
don't know, but is Pearl utilizing EDI for any of its current solutions? What would be the benefit of that? So
that may be over my head too.
Okay. So, I guess SikaSoft or getting data from some other closed systems.
Internally developed. So yeah, everything is internally developed. All of the integrations is internally developed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we have a whole team that does integration. So I'm not usually involved with that.
So let's say that a dentist, maybe this will be my last question. Let's say a dentist integrated, an AI solution like Pearl tomorrow. Like, how would their life change for the better, day one? What's the real benefit versus what's going to be the lift an investment they're going to make, not financial investment, but just change management and all of that.
Yeah, well, the good thing with practice intelligence is that sometimes the dentist doesn't even have to know it's there. So how we're seeing it being used oftentimes is our front office, our assistants, our office managers are going through and looking at the schedule for tomorrow, let's say, and they're finding things from practice intelligence that's saying, hey, I know this patient is coming in for a filling, but we found this thing, maybe they have these caries or whatever it may be, calculus, bone loss, that isn't in the practice management system. Can you just let the dentist know? And so what that front office may do is just make a little note on the practice management system, or, go tell the doctor or give them a sticky note or put it on the routing slip, whatever it may be. And it really makes the office managers or the team look good. So the doctor comes in, hey, Mr. Jones, I know we're doing that filling. I was looking at your radiographs and I saw something on the lower tooth. I just want to take a look because I just want to make sure we're doing the best care. So you can then turn that into same day dentistry. They were coming in for a filling, but now it's a filling and a crown. And everybody benefits like that. It's not oftentimes a huge lift for the dentist. Most of the time with practice intelligence, we're training the team because we want the dentist to not have to change as much as possible. So like how it's working in my practice is if I'm going in to see a patient, I say, okay, Dr. Stanley, we're doing whatever, an implant on this tooth. Can you check 19 though? I just want to make sure that there's not something happening. And there's an open margin on a crown. Can you just check that? It takes me 2 minutes, not even, 30 seconds to either look on the radiograph or look in the patient's mouth and then treatment plan it. And then it's in the treatment plan and we can get it scheduled, whether we do it that day or another day.
Well, I always love it when team can support, right? So
yeah,
it's like you've hired a set of general dentists to sit around and oversee, everything so that you have the best, most productive day possible. So
that's exactly right. You can turn, a $4,000 day into a $6,000 day without bringing in new patients. And that's really what I like is that
nothing worse than a patient coming in a year or 2 years later and you saying, hey, we got to do a crown on this. They're like, well, you've never identified this previously, right?
Right.
Yes. And so having that confidence, I think patient feeling like you're very consistent.
I think so many group practices are focusing so much on marketing, getting new patients in, but they don't realize the value that they have with their current patients. And that's what practice intelligence can really do is go in and analyze every image that you've ever taken, every radiographic image, let's say in the last 2 years for all of your active patients, cross-reference that with what's happening in the practice management system and give you all these insights on your existing patients. Like I said, $750,000 to $1 million is what we see.
I see chief dental officers all the time or practice owners with associates really concerned because they don't have the resources to do a sophisticated, quality review. And so something like this could be assistive for that. It could be, oftentimes you're like, I don't know what to mentor them on. Well, this could help to tee up, hey, I've got some things you can mentor. Again, it's like having a bunch of general dentists out there looking for stuff and then teeing it up to the chief dental officer, like, hey, mentor on this. So
yeah, we've had some, I've talked to a lot of chief dental officers and they, some of them spend like their whole, every day, all day, just auditing charts. And they may be auditing the person that doesn't need to be audited. I don't think
that's what they thought chief dental officer was going to be.
Right. Yeah. They may be auditing the people that don't need to be audited. Right. You don't want them to spend all this time to say, oh, no, this person's fine. Right. You want them to get an alert that says, hey, you may want to check this doc because, we've seen the last 10 crowns they've placed have open margins and this is leaving you for risk.
All right. Last question. This comes from a CTO is, do you see Pearl having an API, either does it now or will it in the future, that allows us to tap into insights and bring them, I think we're thinking here of like multi-locations and you want to kind of spin all that up.
Yeah, Pearl is all API driven. So 100%. Yeah. And it really helps with our group practices when they have everything centralized. Can we do it if there's 50 different offices and they're all on individual servers? Yeah, we can. It just takes longer. Sure. But it's a lot easier when, everything is on Open Dental, everything is on Dentrix, and, everything is, all the images are stored in one specific area. Then that's easier. But we have a full integration team that can make some pretty amazing things happen, even if you're really unorganized. Just takes longer.
Yeah, that's awesome. But that is helpful, even if you're really unorganized. Well, Dr. Stanley, this has been awesome. I love your ambition and your motivation around AI. And I think at the end of the day, you've been able to rip away maybe some of the misconceptions that this is going to be competing. And instead, it's going to be very supportive and allow us to scale with quality, which I think every dentist is interested in. So any other thoughts?
No, coming from a family of dentists, we're on the dentist side. We're not here to take anybody's job or, try to blame anybody, right? We're here to make dentists more successful, have less stress, enjoy their job, do better care.
It's awesome. I think the patients will love it. And if you take care of the patients and support the dentist, then it creates an awesome career. So thank you so much for being on tonight. And thanks everyone for your questions. This has been awesome. And if you have any additional questions for Dr. Stanley, you can come over to DSO Secrets. We've got the DEO event coming up. And of course, you can reach out to Dr. Stanley directly from the slide he showed previously. So thank you all so much and have a great night.
Bye, guys.